Picture standing in a dimly chamber, your footsteps echoing off stone walls untouched for centuries. The air is thick with dust and the weight of time. Then your torchlight catches something, a face staring back at you, not of flesh and bone, but of wood, gold, or jade, carved with symbols you can't decipher. This isn't just any artifact. It's a ritual mask, a silent witness to ceremonies long lost, worn by people whose names and stories have faded into the shadows of history. These masks aren't mere objects. They're portals whispering secrets of civilizations that once thrived before vanishing without a trace. And today, we're uncovering 30 of the most extraordinary ritual masks ever discovered, each one a puzzle piece to understanding the spiritual lives of cultures we've only begun to unravel. Think about the power behind these masks. They weren't crafted for decoration. They were conduits, tools to commune with gods, to transform the wearer into something more than human, to bridge the gap between the living and the divine. Some were meant to terrify, with exaggerated features meant to ward off evil spirits. Others were delicate, adorned with precious stones, worn by shamans or kings in rituals that could alter the fate of entire communities. But here's what's haunting. Every mask we find is a fragment of a story we'll never fully know. The hands that carved them, the voices that chanted around them, the beliefs that gave them meaning, all gone, leaving only these eerie, beautiful remnants behind. What if we could read their secrets? What if these masks could speak? Across deserts, jungles, and forgotten temples, archaeologists have unearthed these relics, some polished and pristine, others weathered by centuries, their colors faded but their presence undiminished. From the haunting funerary masks of ancient Egypt to the fierce wooden visages of Pacific islanders, each one holds clues to the mysteries of their creators. How did they use them? What did they believe? And why were so many buried, hidden, or left behind as if waiting to be found? That's the journey we're starting today. A dive into the unknown, where every mask is a riddle, and every riddle leads us deeper into the heart of humanity's oldest question. Who were we before history began to write our story? Hidden deep in the humid jungles of what is now Mexico, the Olmec civilization flourished over 3,000 years ago, long before the Aztecs or Maya rose to power. Among their most striking legacies is the Jade Death Mask, a masterpiece of artistry and spiritual significance. Carved from a single block of shimmering green jade, this mask wasn't just an offering to the dead, it was a key to the afterlife. The Olmecs believed jade was more precious than gold, a stone imbued with the breath of the gods themselves. Its cool, luminous surface symbolized water, fertility, and eternal life, making it the perfect vessel to guide a ruler into the underworld. What's astonishing is the precision of its craftsmanship. Despite having no metal tools, Olmec artisans shaped this mask with such skill that its features remain hauntingly lifelike. The hollow eyes, the slightly parted lips, it's as if the wearer could still speak. But here's the chilling part, this mask wasn't meant for the living to see. It was placed directly on the face of a deceased king, sealing his identity for eternity. Some archaeologists think these masks weren't just portraits, they were transformations, turning the dead into divine beings. Imagine the ceremony, torches flickering as the mask is lowered onto the ruler's face, his people chanting, believing his spirit would now wield power in the unseen world. And then there's the mystery of the material. Jade doesn't naturally occur in the Olmec heartland. This stone was carried from mountains hundreds of miles away, a journey fraught with danger. Why go to such lengths? Because to the Olmecs, jade wasn't just rare, it was alive. They carved it into axes, figurines, and masks, each piece a prayer in physical form. When you look at this mask, you're not just seeing art, you're seeing faith carved into stone, a civilization's deepest hopes staring back at you. Yet, for all its beauty, this mask hides a grim truth. The Olmecs, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica, vanished, leaving behind no written records, only artifacts like this, whispering fragments of a story we may never fully piece together. Now, shift your gaze from the lush jungles of Mesoamerica to the arid coastal valleys of ancient Peru, where the Moche people forged a civilization as brilliant as the gold they prized. Among their most breathtaking creations is the Golden Sun Mask, a shimmering tribute to their sun god. Unlike the cold, solemn jade of the Olmecs, this mask radiates warmth, hammered from a single sheet of gold so thin it seems to breathe, its surface alive with curling rays and the piercing gaze of a deity. This wasn't just jewelry, it was a crown of light worn by priests during ceremonies that could mean life or death for their people. The Moche didn't just worship the sun, they believed they were its children. When drought scorched their fields or floods swallowed their temples, they turned to rituals with masks like this one, desperate to plead with the gods. Picture the scene, a priest, face hidden behind this glowing visage, arms raised as hundreds watched, their fate hanging on whether the sun would listen. The mask's design is no accident. Every curve mimics the sun's path across the sky, a map of the cosmos in metal, and the craftsmanship unmatched. Without modern tools, Moche metalsmiths mastered techniques like lost wax casting, creating hollow, feather light masks that danced with firelight. But here's what's even more remarkable. This mask isn't just art, it's science. Recent studies reveal the Moche alloyed their gold with copper, not just for strength but for color, a deliberate crimson hue to mimic the rising sun. They understood metallurgy on a level Europe wouldn't reach for centuries. Yet for all their ingenuity, the Moche left no written records. Their masks, buried in royal tombs or hidden beneath temple floors, became their voice across time. When archaeologists unearthed this one, they found it nestled beside skeletons, perhaps sacrifices, their deaths part of the very ritual the mask presided over. So what happened to the Moche? Like the Olmecs, their civilization collapsed, leaving behind gold and whispers. Some blame El Niño's wrath, others war. But their masks endure, not just as relics, but as proof that even in the face of oblivion, humans will always try to touch the divine. And in that, the Golden Sun Mask still succeeds. When light hits it just right, after centuries in the dark, it doesn't just shine, it burns. Leave the golden glow of Peru behind and step into the dry, wind-swept plains of ancient China, where the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, commanded an army not of flesh but of clay. Among the thousands of terracotta warriors standing guard over his tomb, one face stands apart, a life-sized mask hardened by fire, its features frozen in eternal vigilance. This isn't just another soldier. It's a mystery wrapped in baked earth, a rare terracotta mask unlike any other in the emperor's sprawling necropolis. What makes this mask so extraordinary? For starters, it wasn't mass-produced like the warriors. Each soldier in the terracotta army was crafted with unique facial features, but this mask was something different, deliberately detached, as if meant to be held, worn, or even broken in ritual. Archaeologists believe it might have been used in secret funerary ceremonies, a conduit for priests or performers to channel the emperor's spirit before his final journey. Picture it, smoke curling from bronze censers, chanting rising in the dark, and this hollow-eyed face passing between hands, its purpose known only to those who took the secret to their graves. The craftsmanship is staggering. Unlike the warrior's stern expressions, this mask bears an unsettling neutrality, lips sealed, eyes unseeing, designed to erase individuality. Some scholars think it represented Yanluo Wang, the god of death, tasked with guiding the emperor's soul safely through the underworld. Others argue it could be a spirit vessel, meant to trap malevolent forces before they could disturb the emperor's rest. Either way, its presence hints at a deeper layer of fear beneath the army's stoic facade. And then there's the material itself. Terracotta, literally baked earth, was chosen not for its beauty but for its permanence. The Qin dynasty believed in a mirror world afterlife, where everything the emperor needed would continue just as it had in life. His terracotta servants, horses, even entertainers were buried with him, all silent, all waiting. But this mask, it's an outlier. Found in fragments near the tomb's outer chambers, it suggests rituals too perilous or sacred to perform inside the emperor's final resting place. Here's the chilling part. The mask's discovery site was littered with charred offerings, animal bones, shattered jade, and traces of mercury, a substance Qin Shi Huang obsessively consumed in life, believing it granted immortality. Was the mask used in a final, desperate plea to cheat death, or was it a warning, a silent sentinel against the very darkness the emperor feared? We may never know. The Qin dynasty burned its secrets as fiercely as it unified China, leaving behind this ghostly face, its mouth forever shut, its truth buried under 22 centuries of dust. Yet when you stand before it, you can almost feel the weight of its purpose, not just to protect but to terrify. Because in the end, even an emperor who conquered death with an army of clay couldn't escape the one thing his masks were meant to defy: time itself. From the silent gaze of China's terracotta sentinel, we journey now to the towering pyramids of Teotihuacan, where another mask waits. One not of clay or gold, but of black volcanic glass, sharp enough to cut both flesh and time. This is the obsidian shaman mask, a relic so polished it still reflects the faces of those who dare to look into it. Unlike the ornate metals and stones of other masks, this one is simplicity itself. A sleek, elongated face with hollow eyes carved from a single block of obsidian, its surface so flawless it seems to ripple like dark water. But don't let its minimalist design fool you. This mask wasn't meant to be seen, it was meant to see. Teotihuacan's priests, the keepers of sacred knowledge, wielded obsidian like a key to the unseen. When they strapped this mask to their faces, they weren't just wearing a symbol, they were stepping into another world. Obsidian, born from the heart of volcanoes, was believed to hold the memory of fire and the voice of the gods. Its glassy surface acted as a mirror, not for vanity but for visions. Imagine a dimly lit chamber deep beneath the pyramid of the sun, the air thick with the scent of copal incense. A priest masked in obsidian stares into a bowl of water, his reflection fracturing into countless possibilities. The mask's reflective surface would amplify the flickering torchlight, creating a hypnotic dance of shadows, a portal for spirits to slip through. What's even more fascinating is what archaeologists found nearby. These masks were often buried with bundles folded cloth packets filled with jade beads, animal bones, and tiny mirrors. Some think these were divination kits, tools to help the priest navigate the spirit world. But here's the chilling detail: many of these masks were deliberately broken, their fragments scattered in ritual offerings. Why? Because to the Teotihuacanos, breaking the mask might have released its power, like shattering a vessel to free what's inside. And then there's the mask's eerie uniformity. Unlike the individualized faces of the terracotta army or the Olmecs' jade portraits, these obsidian masks share nearly identical features. Elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, lips slightly parted as if whispering a secret. This wasn't an oversight, it was intentional. The priests weren't representing people, they were becoming something else. The mask erased their humanity, turning them into empty vessels for the divine. But the greatest mystery lies in Teotihuacan itself. Unlike the Maya or Aztecs, this city left no written records, no king lists, no battles carved in stone. Its people vanished, leaving behind pyramids, murals, and these masks silent witnesses to rituals we can only guess at. When you hold one of these obsidian faces up to the light, it doesn't just reflect your image. It swallows it. Maybe that was the point. To look into this mask is to stand at the edge of a question. Were the priests seeking answers from the gods, or were they offering themselves, their very identities, as the price to get them? The mask won't tell you, it only shows you what you bring to it, and in that way, even after 1500 years, it's still doing its job. Amidst the splendor of Tenochtitlan's temples, where the air hummed with the chants of priests and the scent of copal smoke, one mask gleamed above all others, the Feathered Serpent Mask of Quetzalcoatl. This wasn't just a symbol, it was a living embodiment of the god himself, a riot of color crafted from hundreds of turquoise tiles, each one hand cut and fitted like scales, crowned with the iridescent feathers of the Quetzal bird. To the Aztecs, this mask wasn't art. It was a divine vessel worn during the most sacred festivals when the boundary between mortal and god blurred into nothingness. The symbolism here is as intricate as the mask itself. Turquoise, mined from distant deserts, represented water and the life-giving sky, while the Quetzal's feathers, plucked from birds captured in the cloud forests, were considered more valuable than gold. Together, they told the story of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who brought wisdom, wind, and the very calendar that governed Aztec life. But this mask wasn't meant for quiet contemplation. It was the centerpiece of ceremonies so vibrant they'd make modern festivals seem pale. Picture the scene: dancers clad in jaguar pelts, drums pounding like a heartbeat, and at the climax, a priest king lifting the mask to his face, becoming the god incarnate. The crowd would surge, believing they stood in the presence of a deity who could command rain or famine with a glance. What's chilling is the mask's duality. Quetzalcoatl wasn't just a benevolent creator, he was also the god of dawn and dusk, a reminder that light cannot exist without darkness. The mask's unblinking turquoise eyes seemed to follow worshippers, a silent warning that even the gods demanded sacrifice. And they did. Historical accounts describe festivals where the mask was paraded alongside captives, their hearts later offered to Quetzalcoatl in exchange for the sun's rising. The feathers, still vibrant after 5 centuries, whisper of this paradox: beauty and brutality woven into the same thread. Yet the mask's true genius lies in its construction. Aztec artisans used Teotihuacan, a wax resin adhesive, to bind each stone without modern glue. The result, a surface so seamless it seemed to ripple like a serpent's hide. And those Quetzal feathers, they were never plucked, the birds were caught, their tail feathers carefully harvested, then released so they could regrow them. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was reverence, a dialogue between human hands and the natural world. But here's the twist: when Spanish conquistadors stormed Tenochtitlan, they melted down gold masks without a second thought, yet this one survived. Hidden away, perhaps by a priest who couldn't bear to see his god defiled, it resurfaced centuries later in a forgotten temple niche. Today, it sits in a museum, its feathers still shimmering, its turquoise undimmed. When you stand before it, you're not just seeing a mask, you're seeing the Aztec world, a place where art, faith, and fear were inseparable, and where a god's face could stare back at you, demanding you remember. Beneath the towering pyramids of Palenque, where howler monkeys scream through the rainforest canopy, archaeologists unearthed a mask that stops the breath in your throat, not gold, not jade, but human bone. This is the bone mask of the Maya, a relic so intimate it seems to pulse with the presence of its original owner. Carved from a single piece of skull, polished to an eerie sheen, its hollow eye sockets and filed teeth tell a story far darker than decoration. This wasn't just an artifact, it was a bridge between worlds, worn by kings to channel the voices of the dead. The Maya didn't fear death, they dined with it. Their rulers claimed descent from ancestors who'd become gods, and masks like this one were their hotline to the divine. Imagine a ceremony deep in the belly of a temple, torchlight flickering over murals of skeletal underworld gods, priests chanting as a living king presses the bone mask to his face. In that moment, he wasn't just a ruler, he was the ancestor reborn, his voice merging with theirs to decree laws, predict harvests, or demand war. The mask's material was no accident. Human bone carried Scythian, the life force that lingered after death. By wearing it, the king didn't just honor the dead, he stole their power. Here's where it gets chilling. Forensic analysis reveals this mask wasn't carved from just any skull. It belonged to someone of high status, perhaps even the king's own predecessor. The Maya practiced skull grooming, altering bones to reflect ideals of beauty even in death. teeth were inlaid with jade, cranial shapes elongated in infancy to mimic the corn god's head. This mask wasn't a crude trophy, it was a masterpiece of posthumous devotion, its surface etched with glyphs naming the ancestor it invoked. But why communicate through bones instead of, say, stone portraits? Because the Maya believed the dead didn't just speak, they listened. Excavations at sites like Capon reveal bone masks buried with death bundles, cloth-wrapped corpses clutching jade beads to pay their way through Xibalba, the treacherous underworld. Some masks were even painted with ik, the Mayan symbol for wind and breath, as if the artifact itself could inhale the prayers of the living. Yet the most haunting detail lies in the mask's imperfections. Tiny cut marks along the edges suggest it was ritually fed with blood, a king's own sacrifice to keep the ancestor's voice clear. Modern Maya elders still whisper that such masks aren't silent. Held in museum cases now, they wait, not for worship, but for the day someone remembers how to ask the right questions. And perhaps that's the true power of this bone-white visage. It confronts us with a culture so fluent in death that they wore it as a second skin, daring us to unravel whether these masks were tools of connection or of conquest over mortality itself. Turn now from the shadowy realm of Maya ancestors to a mask that gleams with deceptive innocence, the laughing mask of the Taino, a civilization whose joy hid a devastating fate. Crafted from dense guaiacan wood, this wide-mouthed, grinning visage seems out of place among solemn ritual artifacts, but don't be fooled by its mirth. This mask laughed while its people vanished. The Taino, the first indigenous group Columbus encountered in the Caribbean, carved these masks for aritos, communal dances where stories of gods and heroes came alive. Worn by shamans or storytellers, the exaggerated grin and circular eyes symbolized Bohique, the trickster spirit who taught humans to navigate a world capricious as the sea. Unlike the Maya's bone whispers or the Aztecs' turquoise splendor, this mask's power lay in its humor, a reminder that even ritual could be joyous, that the divine might crack a joke. Yet the wood itself tells a darker tale. Guaiacan, known as holy wood, was believed to repel evil. The Taino burned it during hurricanes, trusting its smoke would calm the storms. But no amount of sacred wood could shield them from the true tempest, European disease and enslavement. Within a century of contact, 90% of the Taino were gone. Most of these masks were burned as pagan idols by colonizers. The few survivors were hidden in caves, their grins preserved in the dark like final, defiant acts of memory. Today, when descendants of the Taino revive ancestral dances, they replicate these masks from oral descriptions. The laughter carved into them isn't just celebration, it's resistance. A refusal to let joy be buried, and that's the paradox of this artifact. A smile that outlived the hands that carved it, still teaching us that sometimes survival isn't just about remembering the sacred. It's about remembering how to laugh in its face. In the heart of China's Sichuan Basin, buried beneath layers of fertile soil for over 3,000 years, lies a mystery that rewrites history, the bronze masks of Sanxingdui. Unearthed in the 1980s, these aren't just artifacts, they're disruptions. With their grotesquely enlarged ears, bulging eyes, and gaping mouths, they look less like human faces and more like visions from a dream or a nightmare. Cast in bronze so sophisticated it rivals Shang dynasty craftsmanship, these masks defy every expectation. Who were they for? The answer might upend what we know about ancient China. Start with the eyes. Each mask features pupils that protrude like cylinders, stretching unnaturally forward as if straining to see beyond our world. Some scholars argue these represent the legendary eyes that see all, a trait of the god King Zhuangzi, who supposedly could observe both heaven and earth. Others suggest their depictions of shamanic trance states the physical distortion of a priest mid-vision, his senses stretched thin between realms. Then there are the ears, exaggerated to comic proportions, some spanning over a foot in width. They echo ancient texts describing rulers who listened to the wind to divine the future. But here's the twist: Sanxingdui had no writing. These masks are their language, screaming across millennia in a code we're still deciphering. The material alone is a puzzle. Unlike the ritual bronze vessels of contemporaneous dynasties, these masks weren't built for practicality. They're thin, some just millimeters thick, as if meant to be worn, or perhaps hung as conduits for spirits. Chemical analysis reveals the bronze contains trace amounts of lead, a deliberate choice to make the metal resonate like a bell when struck. Imagine a temple where these faces lined the walls, vibrating with sound during ceremonies, their hollow mouths amplifying chants into something otherworldly. But the real shock lies in their isolation. Sanxingdui culture flourished alongside the Shang, yet their art shares no common lineage. No dragons, no touty motifs, just these surreal visages and towering bronze trees that might represent the mythical Fusang, a world tree linking Earth to the heavens. Then, around 1200 BC, the civilization vanished. Was it war, famine, or something more deliberate? The excavation site holds a clue. A vast pit where these masks were ritually smashed, burned, and buried in layers of elephant tusks and jade. This wasn't destruction, it was a farewell. Today, these masks force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History isn't a single story. It's a cacophony of lost voices, some so strange they destabilize our narratives. The Sanxingdui masks don't just depict gods or kings. They depict the act of questioning itself, gaping mouths forever frozen mid-whisper, asking us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. Stare into their hollow eyes long enough, and you might just hear the echo of their final, unanswerable riddle. Who are we to you now? When we think of Egyptian funerary masks, the golden visage of Tutankhamun instantly comes to mind. But dig deeper into the sands of the Nile, and you'll find a quieter, more intimate tradition, the wooden funerary mask. Carved from sycamore or acacia, these masks were the everyman's passport to eternity. Crafted not for pharaohs but for scribes, priests, and merchants who could never afford gold. Yet their simplicity hides layers of meaning. Take the mask of Teotihuacan, a noblewoman whose wooden face, now in Cairo's Egyptian museum, stares back with wide, almond-shaped eyes painted in kohl, not just for beauty, but to see clearly through the darkness of the Juat, the underworld. What's fascinating is how these masks played with color. While gold symbolized the sun god Ra's flesh, wood represented rebirth, the organic material literally sprouting from the Nile's fertile banks. Artists painted them in vibrant hues: red ochre for life's blood, green for Osiris's resurrection, blue lapis for the night sky the soul would travel. Some even had real hair attached, strands still intact after millennia, as if the deceased might wake and brush them aside. But here's the twist: these masks weren't portraits. They were ideals. A middle-aged merchant might be depicted as youthful, his wrinkles smoothed by the artist's brush, because in the afterlife, you didn't just survive, you thrived. The ritual was precise. During the opening of the mouth ceremony, priests touched the mask's lips with a sacred adze, awakening its senses so the soul could eat, drink, and speak in the land of the dead. Some masks even had tiny ear holes, allowing the deceased to hear prayers from the living. And unlike Tutankhamun's solid gold shield, wooden masks often had hollow backs, like a shell waiting to be filled by the spirit. Yet for all their craftsmanship, these masks carried a quiet humility. Many were mass-produced in workshops, with blank spaces left for the owner's name to be added later. Others were recycled, scraped clean, and repainted for new occupants. In death, as in life, practicality sometimes outweighed pomp. The real magic lies in what survived. Gold dazzles, but wood whispers. When archaeologists unearth these masks, they often find them cracked, their pigments flaking, yet somehow the gaze remains intact. Staring into those painted eyes, you're not just seeing a face, you're seeing a bargain struck across time. A promise that even ordinary lives deserve to be remembered. And in that, these humble wooden masks outshine even the brightest gold. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of Colombia's Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, the Tarona people carved a mask that seems to pulse with movement even when held perfectly still, the stone mask of the Tarona. Hewn from smooth, greenish serpentine, its surface swirls with intricate spiral patterns that coil inward like whirlpools or unfurling vines. At first glance, the design feels hypnotic, almost dizzying, but this was no mere decoration. Each curve was a map, a sacred geometry connecting the wearer to the invisible currents of the world. The Tarona, master goldsmiths and stoneworkers, believed these spirals mirrored the paths of a luna, the life force flowing through everything, rivers, mountains, even human breath. Shamans wore these masks during Yuluka, night-long rituals where they communed with jaguar spirits and ancestral guides. The spirals weren't just symbols, they were conduits. Picture a shaman in a torchlit clearing, his face obscured by stone, the carvings catching the firelight until they seem to rotate, a visual chant pulling the spirit world closer. Modern Kogi elders, descendants of the Tarona, still describe these masks as frozen whirlwinds, capturing the moment a deity's whisper took physical form. What's astonishing is the precision of the craftsmanship. Without metal tools, Tarona artisans pecked and polished the serpentine using quartz abrasives, achieving curves so fluid they feel alive under fingertips. The mask's back is hollowed to fit a human face perfectly, but here's the twist: the inside surface is just as polished as the front. This wasn't vanity, it was necessity. A rough interior could chafe the shaman's skin during hours of trance, breaking his connection to the unseen. Every detail served the ritual. Archaeologists found these masks buried in remote caves, often alongside Paporo's lime containers decorated with the same spiral motifs. Together, they formed a toolkit for transcendence. During ceremonies, shamans chewed coca leaves, using the lime to activate alkaloids, while the mask's weight and coolness grounded them amid visions. The spirals, they claimed, kept them from getting lost in the chaos of the spirit world, a cosmic handrail guiding them home. Yet the most haunting detail isn't in the mask's design, but in its silence. The Tarona left no written records. Their masks speak for them, each spiral a sentence in a language we're still learning to read. When you trace those curves today, you're not just touching stone. You're touching a belief system that saw no divide between art and prayer, between the human and the hurricane. And in that, the stone mask does more than represent the sacred. It proves that for the Tarona, the sacred was never abstract. It was something you could wear. In the rolling river valleys of what is now Ohio, 2,000 years before European settlers crossed the Appalachians, the Hopewell people forged a civilization connected by rivers and rituals, and at its heart lay a mask unlike any other. The ceremonial copper mask, hammered from raw ore mined near Lake Superior, gleams with a ruddy sheen even after centuries underground. This isn't just metal shaped into a face, it's a manifesto. The Hopewell didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, and this mask might be their boldest statement. What makes this artifact extraordinary is its material. Copper was the internet of the ancient Midwest, a commodity so valuable it linked tribes from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. But the Hopewell didn't smelt it into tools or weapons. They painstakingly cold hammered nuggets into thin sheets, then shaped them into effigies, ear spools, and this haunting mask. Its features are minimalist, just shallow indentations for eyes and mouth, a nose ridge barely raised. Yet this simplicity speaks volumes. Unlike the Olmecs' jade or the Aztecs' gold, this mask wasn't about dazzle. It was about reach. Archaeologists found it in a burial mound atop a man's skeleton, surrounded by conch shells from Florida, obsidian from Wyoming, and mica from the Carolinas. This wasn't a grave, it was a map. The Hopewell's so-called interaction sphere spanned thousands of miles, and the mask's placement suggests its wearer wasn't just a chief, he was a conduit. Some scholars believe these copper faces were worn during charnel house ceremonies, where bodies were prepared for burial in communal mortuary houses. Imagine the scene, the mask reflecting firelight as mourners passed bundles of bones, its metallic sheen symbolizing not just status, but transformation. The way copper, pulled from the earth, could be reborn as something sacred. Here's where it gets intriguing. The mask's mouth isn't just a slit, it's perforated as if designed to let sound through. Was it meant to amplify a priest's chant? Or was it a filter straining the breath of the living from the whispers of the dead? Recent experiments show that when worn, the mask's hollow interior creates a resonant echo, warping the voice into something unearthly. That's no accident. The Hopewell built earthworks aligned to solstices and lunar cycles. They understood acoustics as part of the sacred, but the real revelation lies in the copper itself. Trace elements match ore from Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, but the mask was found in Ohio, a journey of hundreds of miles by river and portage. This wasn't just trade, it was pilgrimage. The Hopewell likely saw copper as the veins of the earth made visible, a divine gift to be shaped but never melted. In their burials, copper artifacts are often placed over the heart or mouth, as if sealing the soul's pathway or giving it a metallic tongue for the afterlife. Today, the mask sits silent in a museum case, but its legacy hums. It reminds us that sophistication isn't measured in pyramids or golden treasures. Sometimes, it's in the way a culture turns raw ore into a lens, one that lets us glimpse how an entire continent stayed connected, not by empire but by shared awe. And in that, the Hopewell's copper whisper might just be the loudest voice of all. Beneath the open-air theaters of ancient Greece, where actors' voices once echoed to thousands, there lurked a mask so terrifying it could silence an audience with a glance, the Gorgon mask. Unlike the serene marble busts we associate with Greek art, this grotesque visage bulged with wild, staring eyes, a lolling tongue, and serpentine hair writhing as if alive. This wasn't just stagecraft, it was a weapon. In a culture where drama was sacred, the Gorgon's face served two roles, to terrify and to protect, a paradox carved into clay and bronze. The Gorgon's origins lie in myth, where Medusa, the most famous of these monstrous sisters, could turn men to stone with a single look. But her mask wasn't just a retelling of legend. It was a tool of apotropaic magic, designed to repel evil by mimicking its own horrors. Actors wore these masks during performances of tragedies like Euripides' Hecuba, where the Gorgon's appearance signaled moments of divine wrath or impending doom. The audience wouldn't just see the monster, they'd hear her too. Some masks had built-in brass resonators, distorting the actor's voice into a hiss or roar. Imagine the effect, a sudden, jarring shift from human speech to something other, as if the mask itself had come alive. Yet these masks didn't just belong to the stage. They hung above doorways, their gaping mouths acting as spiritual lightning rods to absorb malice. Archaeologists have found terracotta Gorgon masks in sanctuaries, their backsides charred, likely from holding candles, making the eyes flicker demonically in the dark. Even on battlefield shields, the Gorgon's face served as both psychological warfare and divine armor. The message was clear: stare into this face, and you stare into your own annihilation. What's fascinating is how the Gorgon evolved. Early versions, like the 7th century BCE mask from the Temple of Artemis on Corfu, are all teeth and terror. But by the classical period, the mask's features soften slightly, blending beauty with horror. Some scholars argue this reflects a cultural shift, Medusa becoming less a mindless monster and more a tragic figure cursed by the gods. The mask, then, wasn't just about fear, it was about pity. The real power of the Gorgon mask, though, lies in its contradictions. It repelled evil by embodying it, turned actors into deities, and blurred the line between art and sacrament. When a Greek audience watched a Gorgon stare them down, they weren't just spectators. They were participants in a ritual as old as storytelling itself, one where the most terrifying faces might just be the ones that save us. Deep in the royal courts of the Benin Kingdom, where leopard skin cloaks whispered across polished floors, one artifact held power so potent even kings hesitated to touch it, the ivory mask of Benin. Carved from a single elephant tusk, its delicate features embody the essence of Idia, the queen mother whose cunning and diplomacy shaped an empire. This isn't just a portrait, it's a political manifesto in ivory, a defiance of tradition so bold it rewrote the rules of royal art. Benin's artisans worked under a sacred prohibition. No living ruler could be depicted in any form. Yet here, staring back with serene authority, is the face of a queen, not just remembered but immortalized. The mask's intricate carvings tell her story without words. Coral beads cascade like a crown, echoing the wealth she brokered through Portuguese trade. Flanked by stylized mudfish, symbols of duality, and the god Olmec, the design whispers of her ability to navigate both land and sea, the seen and unseen worlds. But the true rebellion lies in the material itself. Ivory, reserved for the most sacred objects, was never meant for human likeness until Idia. The craftsmanship is breathtaking. Every curve of the queen's cheekbone mirrors the Benin ideal of beauty, while the hollowed eyes, once inlaid with iron pupils, seem to peer beyond mere mortals. Portuguese traders described similar masks worn by chiefs during the annual Eid festival, their ivory surfaces gleaming with palm oil as dancers invoked ancestral blessings. Yet this mask wasn't meant for public spectacle. Scholars believe it hung in the Oba's private chambers, a tactile reminder of the woman who secured his throne through war and wisdom. X-rays reveal something astonishing. The back of the mask is carved just as finely as the front, though no one would ever see it. This wasn't carelessness, it was cosmology. The Benin saw art as existing for its own sake, pleasing to the gods even in hidden details. And there's more. Tiny holes along the edges suggest it was once adorned with pendant beads, perhaps jingling softly as the Oba held it during secret rites. The mask's survival is its own miracle. When British forces sacked Benin City in 1897, thousands of bronzes were looted. This ivory treasure narrowly escaped, hidden away or overlooked in the chaos. Today, it stands as a revolution frozen in time, proof that even in a kingdom bound by tradition, one woman's legacy could carve itself into eternity. To hold this mask is to feel the weight of a question. Did Idia break the taboo, or did she become something beyond it? The ivory keeps its secrets, but the answer might lie in the very fact that we're still asking. From the regal silence of Benin's ivory, we turn to a mask that howls, the wolf mask of the Kwak, an adjective Wakw, carved from red cedar and painted with the eerie glow of supernatural fire. Where the Benin mask exudes quiet power, this Pacific Northwest artifact erupts with raw, primal energy, its elongated snout curled in a snarl, its eyes blazing with copper inlays. This isn't just a depiction of a wolf, it's an invitation for the spirit to possess the wearer, transforming dance into something wild and untamed. The Kwak, adjective Wakw, understood masks as living entities, activated only when worn during potlatch ceremonies. A dancer donning this mask didn't perform as a wolf, he became Kwakd, adjective Xw, the legendary wolf spirit, his movements channeling its cunning and ferocity. The mask's hinged jaw could snap open mid-dance, revealing a second, human face inside, a visual metaphor for the thin veil between human and spirit worlds. Carvers soaked cedar in salt water for flexibility, then steamed and bent it into these haunting contours, ensuring the wood would move like flesh. But the true genius lies in the paint. Made from crushed minerals mixed with salmon eggs, the pigments bonded to the cedar in a way modern synthetics can't replicate. Over a century later, the crimson streaks still look wet, as if the mask might bleed. And those copper eyes, they weren't just decorative. Copper, revered as living metal, was believed to hold supernatural sight fitting for a creature that sees beyond human deception. European colonizers tried to ban potlatch ceremonies, seizing masks as pagan idols. Many were lost to fire or museums, severed from their stories. Yet adjective elders kept the knowledge alive, teaching new generations to carve and dance. Today, when a dancer wears this mask in a modern potlatch, the wolf doesn't just return, it reclaims. The mask's growl, echoing through a crowded hall, isn't just art. Its resistance carved in wood, proving some spirits refuse to be silenced. Along the shimmering coastline of Florida's Gulf Coast, where mangroves twist into the tide, the Calusa people built an empire not on agriculture, but on the sea itself, and their most enigmatic relic, the shell mask, is a testament to that bond. Crafted from hundreds of tiny, iridescent horse conch shells, each one drilled and stitched with plant fibers into a delicate, almost mosaic-like face, this mask doesn't just depict the ocean, it is the ocean. Unlike the stone and metal masks of inland cultures, the Calusa's masterpiece whispers of salt spray and shifting tides, a civilization that worshipped gods who walked not on land but in the waves. The mask's design is a marvel of adaptation. Horse conch, fierce predators of the shallows, were sacred to the Calusa, their spiral shells symbolizing the cyclical nature of storms and seasons. By arranging them into a human visage, the Calusa blurred the line between predator and priest. When worn during cacique ceremonies, the mask would have glimmered like sunlight on water, its surface alive with movement as the wearer danced. But here's the twist. Forensic analysis reveals traces of red pigment in the shell crevices, suggesting it was once painted, not just as decoration, but as ritual camouflage. The Calusa believed their shamans could shapeshift into marine creatures, and this mask, stained the color of sunset-touched waves, may have been their tool to vanish into the sea's embrace. What's haunting is how the mask mirrors the Calusa's fate. By the time Spanish explorers arrived, they found a people who ate oysters by the ton, built canals wider than roads, and carved their capital from an island of shells. Yet the invaders also recorded eerie omens, priests warning of a great darkness from the east, a prophecy that came tragically true. European diseases ravaged the Calusa, and by the mid-18th century, their once thriving port stood empty. The mask, found in a brackish mangrove cave, was likely hidden there deliberately, a final act of defiance against the tide of history. Today, when you hold this mask up to the light, the shells still gleam, their edges worn smooth by time but their brilliance undimmed. It's a poignant reminder, the Calusa didn't just live with the ocean. They spoke its language, wore its face, and in the end, returned to it, leaving behind this fragile, defiant artifact, a voice from the deep that still refuses to be drowned. Beneath the wind-swept steppes of Central Asia, where the horizon stretches endlessly and the ghosts of horsemen still seem to ride, the Scythians buried their dead with faces of silver, masks so thin they flutter like leaves when lifted from the earth. These nomadic warriors, feared by Persians and Greeks alike, left no cities or temples, but their burial mounds called kurgans hold treasures that whisper of a culture obsessed with both war and eternity. The silver mask of the Scythians isn't just metal pressed into a face. It's a mirror held up to a people who saw death as the ultimate campaign and the afterlife as a realm to be conquered. What makes these masks extraordinary is their impermanence. Unlike the gold of pharaohs or the jade of Olmec kings, Scythian silver tarnishes easily, its surface darkening until it resembles the ashen hue of a corpse. This wasn't negligence, it was intention. The masks were never meant to dazzle the living. They were made for the dead, designed to weather time just as flesh does, yet never fully dissolve. Some archaeologists believe the Scythians chose silver specifically for its mutability, a metal that would decay gracefully alongside the bones it guarded. The craftsmanship reveals a paradox. These were nomads who lived on horseback, yet their masks display a jeweler's precision. Using repoussé techniques, artisans hammered the silver from behind, shaping delicate brows, high cheekbones, and most hauntingly, eyes left deliberately hollow. This absence isn't an oversight. Scythian shamans taught that the dead saw through different eyes, their vision unclouded by the illusions of the living. The mask's thin lips, often slightly parted, suggest a final breath held eternally at the threshold between worlds. But here's the twist: many of these masks weren't portraits. Forensic reconstructions show mismatches between the mask's features and the skulls beneath them. Some scholars argue they depict not the deceased, but their ancestors, warriors of old whose likenesses were summoned to guide the newly dead through the spirit step. In one kurgan near Kazakhstan, a child's skeleton wore a mask with the heavy jawline of a grown man, as if armored in the face of a forefather for the journey ahead. The rituals surrounding these masks were as fierce as the Scythians themselves. Herodotus wrote of funeral rites where warriors slashed their faces in grief, their blood mingling with the earth that would swallow the dead. The masks, often found with arrowheads lodged in their surfaces, may have been ritually killed to release their power. In one burial, a mask was pierced exactly where the wearer's third eye would be, a wound meant not to destroy but to open. Yet the most revealing detail lies in what's missing. Scythian women, some buried with weapons equal to their male counterparts, wore identical silver masks. One, discovered in Ukraine, bears the marks of a battle-scarred cheek, proving these weren't mere symbols of beauty. They were battle standards for the afterlife, declaring that in death, as in life, the Scythians would bow to no one. When wind howls across the steppe today, it doesn't just stir grass, it stirs silver, the mask's silent sentinels still keeping watch over a people who refuse to fade. In the bone-dry canyons of the American Southwest, where rain is as precious as gold, the ancestral Pueblones crafted a mask that held the key to survival, the turquoise mosaic mask. Pieced together from hundreds of tiny turquoise tiles, each one chipped to perfection and set in resin made from pinyon pine sap, this artifact isn't just a relic. It's a prayer made tangible, a bridge between the parched earth and the storm clouds that refuse to come. What makes this mask extraordinary is its material. Turquoise, mined from sacred sites like the Cerrillos Hills, wasn't just decorative to the Pueblones, it was the literal flesh of the earth, a stone born from the marriage of copper and water, two elements they desperately needed for their crops. The color itself mirrored the fleeting blue of a monsoon sky, a hue so potent they believed wearing it could summon the rain. Shamans donned these masks during Katsina ceremonies, becoming living vessels for the Kachina spirits, divine messengers who carried pleas for water to the gods. Picture the scene: dancers adorned with this mosaic face, their movements mimicking the rhythmic fall of rain, while the turquoise caught the firelight, shimmering like distant lightning. The craftsmanship reveals a deeper magic. Unlike other masks carved from a single block, this one is a puzzle. Each turquoise fragment carefully selected for shade, creating a gradient that mimics the sky at dawn. The back of the mask tells another story, traces of fingerprint marks in the resin, proof that the artisan's hands worked the sacred material not just with tools, but with skin, infusing the mask with human longing. And the eyes, always the eyes, were left as voids, not out of neglect, but because the Kachinas were meant to see through the wearer, not from him. Archaeologists found one such mask buried beneath a kiva altar in Choco Canyon, its tiles still vibrant despite centuries in the dark. Nearby, pottery shards bore images of tadpoles and cornstalks, symbols of the life this mask was meant to summon. But here's what's haunting: the Pueblones didn't just wear these masks. They fed them. Offerings of blue cornmeal and parrot feathers, trade goods from Mesoamerica, were tucked into the hollows, as if the mask itself were a living thing to be nourished. The true power of this artifact lies in its paradox. Turquoise is fragile, drop it, and it shatters. Yet the Pueblones chose it to face droughts, wars, and the unrelenting sun. Maybe that's the lesson. They didn't crave unbreakable idols. They needed something as fragile as the rain itself. A reminder that survival isn't about strength alone, but the courage to keep asking even when the sky stays silent. When you hold this mask today, the tiles cool against your palm. You're not just holding art, you're holding hope hardened into stone. Riding across the vast Eurasian steppes where the wind carries the echoes of forgotten battles, the Sarmatians crafted masks not of gold or stone, but of hardened leather. Faces molded from the hides of the very horses they rode into war. These weren't mere disguises, they were psychological weapons designed to twist the human visage into something monstrous, a fusion of man and predator that left enemies questioning whether they fought mortal warriors or demons summoned from the earth. The leather mask of the Sarmatians survives today as a crumpled, brittle relic, but in its prime it was a masterpiece of terror and devotion, soaked in sweat, blood, and the smoke of sacrificial fires. What made these masks so unnerving was their grotesque realism. Unlike the stylized helmets of Rome or Persia, Sarmatian leather masks exaggerated human features into nightmarish proportions, elongated jaws bristling with boar's tusks, brows ridged like a wolf's snout, and eye holes stretched into almond-shaped slits that glowed from within when backlit by torchlight. Archaeologists found traces of red ochre and black char inside the eye sockets, suggesting warriors inserted burning embers or phosphorescent fungi to make the masks breathe fire in the darkness. Imagine the scene, a horde of these masked riders emerging from a dust storm, their faces alive with flickering light, their war cries distorted by the mask's internal resonators, a sonic and visual assault meant to shatter morale before the first arrow flew. But the masks weren't just for battle. They were sacred objects ritually anointed with fermented mare's milk and wolf fat before combat, a plea to the war god H-Varana to fill the wearer with the spirit of the steppe's deadliest predators. Sarmatian shamans taught that leather, unlike metal, retained the life force of the animal it came from. By wearing a mask stitched from the hide of a stallion killed in mid-gallop, a warrior absorbed its speed and fury. Some masks even had tufts of horsehair attached to the chin, mimicking a beast's mane, amplifying the illusion of transformation. The craftsmanship reveals a nomadic ingenuity. Without kilns or forges, Sarmatian artisans boiled leather in salt water to toughen it, then molded it over wooden forms while still pliable. The interior was lined with sheep's wool, not for comfort but to absorb sweat and prevent slippage during combat. Tiny perforations along the edges hint at straps that secured the mask tightly enough to survive the chaos of a cavalry charge, yet allowed the wearer to tear it off quickly if dismounted. Yet the most revealing detail lies in how these masks were buried. Excavations near the Don River uncovered a chieftain's grave where the mask had been deliberately slashed diagonally across the mouth, a ritual killing to release the warrior's spirit. Beside it lay a shattered iron mirror, a practice seen from Scythia to Siberia, symbolizing the breaking of ties between the living and the dead. The Sarmatians didn't just fear death, they courted it, believing the greatest warriors earned the right to ride eternally in H-Varana's spectral horde. Their masks, though crafted from perishable material, carried a defiance that echoes across millennia. A people so fierce they wore the faces of monsters, not to hide their humanity, but to unleash it. Among the treasures of the Mixtec people, masters of gold and turquoise, one artifact stands apart, not for its craftsmanship, but for the storm of doubt that follows it. The crystal skull mask, carved from a single block of clear quartz, gleams with an otherworldly perfection, its hollow eyes and serrated teeth mirroring the skull masks of Aztec death gods. But here's the catch: no one can agree if it's a relic of genius or the most audacious hoax in Mesoamerican history. The mask's supporters point to its material as proof. Quartz, harder than steel, would have required Mixtec artisans to grind it for years using sand abrasives and reed drills, a feat documented in their codices. The precision is staggering. The eye sockets align perfectly with human anatomy, and microscopic tool marks spiral inward, matching Mixtec techniques for sacred objects. Then there's the wear pattern. Patina deep in the crevices suggests centuries of handling, while residue tests reveal traces of zacatl, a ceremonial paste used to adhere masks during rituals. But skeptics wield science like a scalpel. Modern scanners detected inconsistencies, pockets of the quartz with molecular structures suggesting machine-assisted polishing, something no pre-Columbian culture possessed. The teeth symmetry is too perfect, rivaling dental molds. And then there's the provenance. The mask surfaced in the 1920s, sold by a dealer linked to infamous forgeries. Even its discovery site was later found to be salted with fake artifacts. Perhaps the truth lies between extremes. Some scholars propose it's a colonial-era hybrid, a Mixtec artisan, forced to work under Spanish rule, blending indigenous motifs with European lapidary tools. Others believe it's a genuine sacred object, later enhanced to fetch a higher price from collectors. The real mystery isn't just how it was made, but why we care so much. Crystal skulls tap into our obsession with the uncanny objects that defy logic, whispering of lost technologies or alien contact. The Mixtecs who saw quartz as frozen light might laugh at our debates. To them, the mask's power never depended on its age, but on the stories it carried. Whether it's 5 centuries old or 50, its unblinking gaze still asks the same question. Does it matter more what something is or what we believe it to be? Beneath the red earth of Nigeria's Jos Plateau, where baobab trees stretch toward the sky like skeletal fingers, the Nok people left behind terracotta masks so arresting they seem to watch you across 2 millennia. These aren't the polished artifacts of empires or the gilded relics of kings. They're earthy, raw, and pulsing with a vitality that defies their fractured state. The painted mask of the Nok, with its triangular eyes and parted lips, carries traces of pigment once as vibrant as the culture that shaped it, a fleeting glimpse into West Africa's oldest known figurative art tradition. What sets these masks apart is their startling humanity. Unlike the abstract deities of Egypt or the monstrous gorgons of Greece, Nok terracottas depict faces so individualized they could be portraits, deeply lined foreheads, full lips, and cheekbones carved with an almost tactile realism. Some scholars argue these masks represented ancestors, their features exaggerated during firing to emphasize wisdom or status. The surviving paint tells its own story. Red ochre for life's blood, white kaolin for the spirit world, and charcoal black for the fertile soil that sustained them. When worn during initiation rites, these colors would have shimmered in firelight, transforming the wearer into a living bridge between generations. The craftsmanship reveals a paradox. The Nok had no written language, no sprawling cities, yet their terracotta technology surpassed contemporaries across the continent. Using clay tempered with crushed quartz, they built masks hollow to prevent cracking in the kiln, with perforated ears and nostrils to allow heat escape. But here's the mystery. Many masks show deliberate damage, broken noses, shattered jaws, long before archaeologists unearthed them. Were they ritually killed to release spirits, or shattered during ceremonies to symbolize the breaking of childhood in puberty rites? The answer might lie in the burial sites where they're found, often alongside iron tools and beads, as if the masks were companions for the dead's journey. Perhaps most haunting is what these masks conceal. CT scans of intact Nok terracottas reveal something astonishing. Hidden chambers inside the heads, some containing seeds or animal bones. Was this a symbolic offering, or did the Nok believe the mask itself needed sustenance? Modern Yoruba elders, whose traditions may carry echoes of Nok practices, speak of As, the life force stored within ritual objects. A mask with a hollow core wasn't empty, it was waiting to be filled. The Nok vanished around 500 CE, leaving no descendants to decipher their legacy. Their masks, buried by time, resurfaced only when tin miners struck terracotta in the 1940s. Today, these fractured faces challenge our assumptions about African art. They're not primitive prototypes, they're masterpieces, proof that 2,000 years ago, in the heart of West Africa, artists were asking the same questions that haunt us now. How do we remember? What do we carry forward? And when the fires of time reduce us to fragments, what, if anything, will our faces still dare to say? Gold may gleam and jade may dazzle, but few materials capture sunlight itself quite like amber, the golden tear of ancient forests fossilized over millions of years. And in the misty pine groves of the Baltic coast, where tribes once whispered prayers to a sun that barely rose in winter, a single artifact distills that radiance into human form, the amber mask of the Baltic tribes. Unearthed from a peat bog in modern-day Latvia, this delicate, honey-hued visage isn't just a relic, it's a conversation with the sky. Amber was more than decoration to these northern peoples. It was lifeblood. The Baltic tribes believed each piece held a sliver of the sun's soul, trapped when the gods wept resin onto primordial trees. Unlike the Mediterranean's polished gemstones, Baltic amber arrived rough from the sea, tossed ashore by storms, a gift from the water shaped by fire. This mask, carved from a single chunk of the clearest amber, magnifies light like a lens, its surface etched with spiral patterns mimicking the sun's path. Worn by Vedilutes, female shamans who communed with the seasons, it transformed the wearer into Saul's mater, the sun's daughter, a living bridge between the frozen earth and the distant, life-giving star. The mask's fragility tells its own story. Amber is soft, easily scarred by a careless touch, yet this piece survives with near-perfect symmetry. Microscopic tool marks reveal how artisans used bone needles and sanded fish vertebrae to carve it, their movements as precise as the solstice alignments they revered. But here's the mystery: the back isn't smoothed for wear. Instead, it's pocked with tiny holes, suggesting it was sewn onto fabric or hung as a sacred focal point during the Rossa festival, when bonfires and amber-adorned priestesses beckoned the sun back from the brink of the longest night. Modern science adds another layer to the magic. When exposed to UV light, something the Baltic sun filters through even in winter, the mask fluoresces blue at its edges, a phenomenon the tribes might have seen as divine radiance. Chemical analysis detected traces of burnt bog myrtle in its crevices, a herb used to induce trances. Imagine the scene: a shaman, face shimmering behind amber, breathing smoke that twisted into the cold air, her chants syncing with the crackle of ritual flames as the mask caught and magnified every flicker, turning her into a living candle against the dark. Yet the most poignant detail lies in its burial. Found face down in peat, the mask was wrapped in woven linen stained with fermented honey, a final offering to the gods, or perhaps a preservation tactic, as peat's acidic tannins prevent decay. For all its connection to light, the mask was laid to rest in the damp embrace of the earth, a paradox that captures the Baltic worldview, that the sun's return wasn't guaranteed, but earned through ritual, sacrifice, and artifacts like this. Fragile, luminous, and stubbornly hopeful. Today, when you hold this mask up to a window, it doesn't just filter the light. It remembers it, glowing with the patience of millennia, still waiting for the winter to break. Baked from clay 7,000 years ago in the fires of Europe's first kilns, the horned mask of the Cucuteni Tripilia culture doesn't just depict a bull, it channels its raw, primal power. Unearthed from a grain-filled pit in modern-day Romania, this mask's sweeping crescent horns and wide, hollow eyes speak of a people who didn't just farm the land, they worshipped its rhythms. Unlike later civilizations that carved gods in human form, these Neolithic artisans shaped their deities in the image of the beasts that made survival possible. This isn't a mask meant for kings or warriors. It's a testament to dirt-stained hands and the first prayers whispered over sprouting seeds. The symbolism here is as elemental as the soil itself. Bulls represented more than strength to the Cucuteni Tripilia. They embodied the earth's fertility, their horns mirroring the crescent moon that governed planting cycles. Archaeologists found similar horned motifs etched on grain storage bins and pressed into loom weights, suggesting every facet of life tied back to this sacred animal. But the mask's true genius lies in its duality. The interior is smeared with ochre and charred grain residue, proof it was worn during rituals where fire, seed, and animal sacrifice intertwined. Picture the scene: a shaman, face hidden behind curved horns, stamping bare feet on a floor strewn with emmer wheat, the mask absorbing smoke from a clay oven as villagers chanted for the earth to wake. What's startling is the mask's construction. At nearly a foot wide, its paper-thin walls defy the crude pottery of the era. Microscopic imprints reveal it was molded over a basketry frame, then fired at temperatures high enough to vitrify the clay, a technological leap that predated the wheel by millennia. The horns, though fragile, were engineered with internal ridges to prevent collapse, their curves echoing the ox-drawn plows that first split the Balkan grasslands. And the eyes pierced as if to see beyond the physical, align perfectly with the wearer's gaze when tilted upward, a deliberate angle for communing with the sky. But the most haunting detail lies in its burial, found alongside 7 identical masks, all deliberately shattered and buried beneath a granary. This wasn't a discard, it was an offering. The Cucuteni Tripilia practiced domicide, ritually burning entire villages every 60 years only to rebuild atop the ashes. The masks, crushed in precise patterns, may have been sacrificial keys to this cycle of renewal. Modern experiments show that when reconstructed, the horn fragments emit a low, resonant hum when wind passes through them, an accidental music the ancients might have attributed to the bull's spirit roaring from the earth. Today, the mask's unblinking stare confronts us with a revolutionary idea. The dawn of agriculture wasn't just about survival. It was the moment humanity first bargained with nature, trading wild freedom for the gamble of harvest. When the Cucuteni Tripilia pressed this clay to their faces, they weren't just wearing a god. They were becoming the promise that sustains every farmer's hand still, that if you kneel to the soil long enough, it will rise to meet you. Beneath the peat bogs of Denmark, where the Iron Age clings to artifacts like a jealous god, lies a sliver of gold so thin it trembles at a breath, the gold foil mask of the Vikings. More fragment than face, this delicate sheet barely covers a palm, yet its very existence shatters stereotypes of Norse raiders as brutish warriors. Crisscrossed with intricate stamped patterns resembling interlaced serpents, this isn't battle gear, it's a whisper from the shadowy realm of Seda, the Viking practice of prophecy and shape-shifting, where magic was woven as deftly as sailcloth. Gold foil masks like this one have surfaced from Sweden to Iceland, often near elite burial sites or what were once wooden temples. Their fragility defies logic. Why craft something so exquisite yet so easily crushed? The answer might lie in the Viking concept of hammer, the outer self that could be altered by sorcerers. Sagas describe Seda practitioners, often women, wearing gilded disguises to cloak their humanity while channeling spirits. Picture the scene: a vulva seeress seated high on a wooden platform, her face flickering behind this golden veil as she chewed hallucinogenic henbane, her chants warped by the foil's resonance into something uncanny. The mask didn't conceal it, transformed, bending light and sound until the line between mortal and god blurred. The craftsmanship reveals a paradox. Vikings are famed for their arm rings and sword hilts, yet this foil was painstakingly embossed using bronze dies, each serpentine curve mirroring the Midgard serpent encircling the Viking cosmos. Under magnification, the gold shows microscopic wear on the right eye hole, evidence it was worn repeatedly, perhaps by multiple users. But here's the twist: some foils were found deliberately folded, like the Torfa spell papers later used in Icelandic magic. Were they crumpled to trap a spirit inside or to preserve a prophecy's power? The most haunting detail comes from the Unglinga saga, which warns that Seda could unmake the world if misused. A foil mask found in Finn, Denmark, was pierced clean through where the wearer's mouth would be, a ritual silencing, or a way to siphon breath into the spirit world. Modern metallurgists note these foils are nearly pure gold, too soft for permanence. Perhaps that was the point. Like the spells they facilitated, the masks were meant to shimmer brilliantly, then vanish ephemeral as the northern lights and just as untamable. When you hold this fragment today, its edges crumbling like gilded frost, you're not just touching art. You're touching the Viking soul, fierce, fleeting, and forever dancing on the edge of myth. On the wind-whipped cliffs of Rapa Nui, where stone giants stare blankly across an empty ocean, the stone mask of Easter Island crouches in shadow, a relic as enigmatic as the island itself. Carved from dense basalt, its rough-hewn surface bears none of the intricate details of other ritual masks. Instead, its power lies in its stark simplicity: hollow eyes, a flattened nose, and a mouth slightly agape as if frozen mid-chant. This isn't just a mask, it's a cipher, one that might hold the key to understanding the island's most secretive rite, the Tangata Monu or Birdman cult. The mask's discovery near Orongo, the ceremonial village perched atop a 300-meter crater, immediately linked it to the Birdman competition. Each spring, warriors would scramble down sheer cliffs, swim through shark-infested waters to the islet of Motu Nui, and retrieve the first sooty-tern egg of the season. The winner's chief would then don ceremonial garb, possibly including this very mask, transforming into the embodiment of Make, the creator god who shaped the island from volcanic fire. But here's the twist: the mask's material tells a deeper story. Basalt, heavier and harder to carve than the island's softer tuff, was reserved for objects of immense spiritual weight. The stone's volcanic origin tied it to the underground world of the Orca, the spirits believed to whisper through the island's porous rock. What's fascinating is how the mask's design diverges from Easter Island's famous moai. While those statues gaze outward, the mask's hollow eyes turn inward, suggesting it wasn't meant to intimidate enemies but to focus the wearer's vision during trance states. Faint grooves along the temples hint at long-vanished attachments, perhaps feathers mimicking the wings of the sooty tern, or cords that would have tightened the mask to the face during frenzied dances. Modern Rapa Nui elders describe similar masks in oral histories, calling them Kohau Rongorongo, though no surviving Rongorongo tablets depict them directly. Archaeologists uncovered the mask near a petroglyph-covered stone slab depicting the Birdman's grueling race. Traces of red ochre still cling to its edges, the same pigment used to anoint competitors before their plunge into the sea. But the real revelation came when researchers noticed the mask's interior wasn't smooth for comfort, it was deliberately textured with tiny chisel marks. Pressed against a sweaty face, these ridges would have caused discomfort, even pain. This wasn't an oversight, it was ritual design. The Birdman ceremony wasn't just about victory, it was about endurance, about proving one's body could channel divine will through suffering. The mask's final mystery lies in its abandonment. Found buried beneath a collapsed hair pinga elliptical house, it shows no signs of damage, suggesting it was hidden rather than discarded. Some scholars tie its burial to the 1860s, when Peruvian slave raids and introduced diseases decimated the Rapa Nui priesthood. Others argue it was interred earlier, as the Birdman cult itself faded under pressure from Christian missionaries. Either way, the mask's silent lips guard one last secret, whether it was buried to preserve tradition or to bury it forever, ensuring that some knowledge, like the island's vanished palm forests, would never return. Today, when mist rolls over Orongo's ruins, the mask seems to watch from museum cases, its basalt surface still humming with the echoes of chants we'll never hear. It reminds us that Rapa Nui's story isn't just one of collapse, but of reinvention, a people who, faced with ecological disaster, didn't just cling to old gods, but forged new ones from stone and feather and sea spray. The mask doesn't just represent the Birdman, it becomes him, poised eternally between cliff and ocean, between memory and myth. Deep in the heart of the Amazon, where the canopy hums with unseen life and rivers twist like serpents through emerald shadows, the indigenous tribes craft masks that don't just depict spirits, they become wings. The feather mask of the Amazonian tribes isn't just an artifact, it's a kinetic prayer, a burst of color and movement woven from the very essence of the rainforest. Imagine a shaman clad in this living tapestry, his face obscured by a cascade of scarlet macaw plumes, emerald quetzal feathers, and the iridescent blue of cotinga birds, each strand trembling as he sways to the rhythm of a chant older than memory. This is no costume, it's a vessel designed to lift the wearer beyond the physical world and into the realm of Yakuruna, the water spirits, or Sachamama, the mother of the forest. What makes these masks extraordinary is their impermanence. Unlike the stone and metal relics of other cultures, feather masks are ephemeral, their brilliance fading with time, their fibers succumbing to humidity and wear. But that's precisely the point. The tribes see feathers as fragments of the divine, shed by birds who soar where humans cannot. By binding them into masks, they harness this fleeting magic. The Shipibo-Kanibo people, for example, select feathers based on dreams, believing each plume carries the signature of a specific spirit. A harpy eagle's feather might invoke predatory strength, while the delicate down of a hummingbird channels agility and grace. The mask's construction is itself a ritual, sinew threaded with chant-soaked fiber, dyes brewed from jungle vines, and sometimes hidden among the feathers. A single seed or bead, a tactile anchor for the shaman's soul to find its way back. During ayahuasca ceremonies, these masks transform. Under the brew's influence, the wearer's breath becomes the rustle of wings, the rust-colored feathers of a hawk merging with visions of celestial fire. Modern ethnobotanists have documented how the mask's movement, swaying, darting, syncs with the rhythmic Icaro's sacred songs, creating a multisensory trance state. The shaman's face, obscured by feathers, dissolves into abstraction, freeing the spirit to travel. Some masks even incorporate hollow bones or seed pods that rattle with each motion, mimicking the rainforest's own soundtrack. Yet the mask's beauty belies a somber truth. Many of the birds whose feathers adorn them, the hyacinth macaw, the Spix's guan, are now critically endangered, their populations decimated by deforestation and the illegal pet trade. The Matses people of Peru have begun substituting dyed plant fibers for rare feathers, adapting tradition to a changing world. But the masks persist not as relics but as living emblems of resistance. When a Mates elder dons his feather mask today, he isn't just honoring ancestors, he's asserting the forest's right to exist. The feathers may fade, but their message doesn't, that some bonds between human and bird, earth and spirit, are too vital to be severed. In the end, these masks are more than art. They're a dialogue with the invisible, a testament to a culture that sees the rainforest not as a resource, but as a chorus of voices waiting to be heard. When the shaman lifts his feathered face to the canopy, he isn't just wearing a mask. He's answering a call, one that echoes through every thread of green and gold, urging us to listen before the song fades into silence. Off the rugged coast of Sardinia, where the mistral wind howls through ancient Nuraghi towers, archaeologists unearthed faces that seem to snarl back at time itself, the Bronze Age masks of Sardinia. Cast in weathered bronze, their expressions contort into grotesque grimaces, with hollow eyes that refuse to blink and mouths twisted as if frozen mid-scream. These aren't the serene visages of gods or ancestors. They're the faces of something far more unsettling, perhaps witches, demons, or the unseen forces that Bronze Age islanders believed lurked in every storm and failed harvest. The mask's designs are a study in deliberate terror. Exaggerated wrinkles crease the foreheads like cracked earth, while bared teeth, some jagged, some filed into points, evoke the gnashing of hunger or rage. Unlike the symmetrical beauty of Egyptian death masks or the stoic nobility of Roman busts, these Sardinian artifacts embrace distortion. One particularly chilling example, found near the sacred well of Santa Cristina, features an elongated chin and protruding tongue, a motif echoed in later Mediterranean cultures as a ward against the evil eye. The effect isn't just eerie, it's confrontational. These masks weren't meant to be admired, they were meant to fight. But who or what were they fighting? The leading theory points to exorcism rituals. Sardinia's Bronze Age tribes, the enigmatic Neuragic people, left no written records, but their burial sites tell stories. Many masks were discovered near healing springs or shrines, often alongside tiny bronze figurines of animals and warriors. Some scholars believe shamans wore these masks during ceremonies to drive out illness or curses, their distorted features mimicking the pain they sought to expel. Imagine the scene, a healer face hidden behind bronze, chanting over a feverish child as the mask's hollow eyes caught the flicker of torchlight, turning the wearer into a living conduit between suffering and salvation. Yet there's another, darker possibility. Several masks bear traces of wheat pollen and sickle marks, suggesting ties to harvest festivals. In a land where drought could mean starvation, the Neuragic people might have used these visages to embody mammothons, spirits of punishment and renewal. Folklore passed down through millennia describes masked processions where villagers, clad in animal hides and bronze faces, stomped the earth to awaken its fertility. The mask's grimaces, then, could represent the agony of the land itself, a scream against the injustice of barren soil. The craftsmanship reveals a paradox. Despite their crude appearance, the masks were made using the lost wax technique, a sophisticated method requiring precise control of fire and metal. Each one is unique, with variations in alloy suggesting local workshops competing to create the most potent designs. One mask, found near the village of Teti, contains trace amounts of arsenic, a deliberate addition to make the bronze gleam whitish under moonlight, amplifying its supernatural aura. The backs of several masks show abrasions from leather straps, proof they were worn repeatedly, their surfaces polished smooth by the grip of frantic hands. What chills the bones, though, is their abandonment. Unlike treasures buried with the dead, these masks were often discarded in remote caves or thrown into wells, places the Neuragic associated with portals to the underworld. Were they too powerful to keep, or had they served their purpose, their magic spent? Modern Sardinians still whisper of Masher Antigas, ancient masks that curse those who disturb them. Perhaps the Neuragic understood something we've forgotten, that some faces aren't meant to be remembered, only feared. When you stand before these bronze grimaces today, their silence is louder than any scream. They don't just represent the unknown, they are the unknown, staring back with a question we'll never fully answer. Did they guard the living from the dead, or the dead from the living? Buried beneath the volcanic soil of Japan's northern reaches, where ancient forests once whispered to a people long vanished, lies a mask that defies time, not with stone or metal, but with something far more fragile, lacquer. The lacquered mask of the Jomon, a relic from Japan's prehistoric past, gleams with a dark, otherworldly sheen, its surface swirling with patterns pressed into wet clay over 5,000 years ago. Unlike the polished grandeur of later Japanese art, this mask is raw, almost primal, its features distorted as if glimpsed through water. Yet its survival is a miracle, a testament to the Jomon's mastery of nature's most elusive alchemy. The Jomon era, stretching from 14,000 to 300 BCE, was a time of profound intimacy with the natural world. These hunter-gatherers didn't just live off the land, they communed with it, crafting pottery so sophisticated it predates agriculture itself. Their masks, like this lacquered one, were extensions of that dialogue. Made from fired clay and coated in yorushi, a sap harvested from toxic lacquer trees, the mask's glossy surface wasn't just decorative. It was sacred. The Jomon believed yorushi held the spirit of the tree, a living barrier against decay and malevolent forces. To wear lacquer was to wear the forest skin, its sticky residue burning the artisan's hands as they shaped it into something divine. What's striking is the mask's duality. One side bears the imprint of coiled rope, Jomon means cord marked, a signature of Jomon pottery. These intricate patterns pressed into the clay before firing might represent water, nets, or even the coils of a serpent deity. Flip it over and the interior reveals something haunting: tiny, deliberate fingerprints. Archaeologists believe these were left by shamans who mixed clay with their own saliva, infusing the mask with their essence before rituals. The distortions, elongated eyes, a mouth slightly off-center weren't mistakes. They were distortions meant to unsettle, to signal the wearer's transformation into something other. The rituals themselves remain shrouded in mystery, but clues linger in the mask's discovery site. Found near a shell midden in Aomori Prefecture, it lay beside figurines of voluptuous, possibly pregnant women dogu, and the bones of red-crowned cranes, birds revered as messengers between worlds. Some scholars speculate the mask was used in kamiasobai, ceremonies where shamans channeled animal spirits to ensure successful hunts or safe childbirth. Others point to its proximity to burials, suggesting it guided the dead through the yomi, the underworld of Japanese myth. Yet the mask's true revelation lies in its resilience. Lacquer, though delicate, becomes nearly indestructible when cured, resisting water, acid, even time. The Jaman, with no written language, no cities, left their stories not in scrolls, but in this, a face that refused to fade. When you hold it today, the lacquer still warm to the touch, you're not just holding art. You're holding the oldest known lacquered object in Japan, a relic from a world where every tree, every drop of sap, every coiled rope pattern was a prayer. And in that silent, gleaming surface, the Jaman's voices echo, not in words, but in the stubborn, luminous refusal to be forgotten. High in the cloud forests of Oaxaca, where the ruins of Monte Albon cling to the mountains like a stone crown, the Zapotec people left behind a mask that doesn't just depict gods, it maps the heavens. The mosaic mask of the Zapotec is a masterpiece of sacred geometry. Its surface a constellation of turquoise, jade, and shell fragments arranged with mathematical precision. At first glance, it resembles a shimmering puzzle, but look closer, every tessellating triangle and interlocking diamond is a coded language, a fusion of art and astronomy that reveals the Zapotec's genius for turning time into tangible form. The mask's design is a microcosm of the Zapotec cosmos. Each gemstone represents a celestial body: turquoise for Venus, the morning star; jade for the life-giving sun; iridescent shell for the moon's watery glow. The zigzag patterns framing the eyes aren't mere decoration, they mirror the stepped fret designs found on Zapotec temples, symbolizing the eternal cycle of day and night. Even the mask's proportions follow the golden ratio, a mathematical harmony the Zapotecs shared with cultures as distant as the Greeks, though they arrived at it independently through their obsession with tracking the stars. This wasn't just adornment, it was wearable cosmology, worn by high priests during ceremonies in Monte Albon's celestial observatory. The mask transformed its wearer into a living almanac. The Zapotec calendar, one of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated, divided time into 52-year cycles, each marked by rituals to prevent cosmic collapse. Picture the scene: a priest, face ablaze with mosaic light, standing atop the temple of the Danzantes as the Pleiades reached their zenith. The mask's jewels would align with constellations painted on his ceremonial cloak, turning his body into a mirror of the night sky. With chants and burnt offerings, he didn't just honor the gods, he balanced time itself. The craftsmanship borders on alchemy. Using tree resin mixed with crushed limestone, Zapotec artisans bonded each stone without modern adhesives. X-rays reveal something astonishing. Beneath the glittering surface, the mask's clay base is hollow, with tiny quartz beads placed inside. When moved, they create a soft rattle, likely mimicking the sound of rain, a sacred echo in a culture where maize was divinity. But the true marvel lies in the materials: turquoise imported from the American Southwest, jade from Guatemala, spondylus shells from the Pacific, all traded across distances that defied the era's technology. This mask wasn't just a ritual object, it was a diplomatic passport, proof of the Zapotecs' vast spiritual and economic network. Yet the most haunting detail isn't in the mask's brilliance but in its burial. Found in Tomb 7 at Monte Alban, it lay beside a skeleton draped in a jade bat pectoral, the Zapotec symbol for the underworld. The tomb's walls were painted black and studded with mica to mimic the night sky, suggesting the mask wasn't just a tool for the living but a guide for the dead. Modern Mixtec elders, descendants of the Zapotec, still speak of Uyoba, the path of the ancestors, where such masks lit the way through the 9 layers of the underworld. Today, when you stand before this mosaic marvel in Mexico's National Museum of Anthropology, its stones still gleam as if wet with starlight. The Zapotec may have vanished, their language silenced by conquest, but their mask endures as a paradox, both a clock and a key measuring time while defying it. In those intricate patterns, we don't just see the face of a forgotten priesthood. We see the universe itself pieced together one sacred stone at a time. Buried beneath the rolling green hills of southern England, where Neolithic stone circles whisper of older gods, lies a mask so fragile it might crumble at a touch, the chalk mask of the ancient Britons. Carved from a single block of spongy, porous chalk, its surface is pocked with time, yet its hollow eyes and lipless grin still radiate an eerie vitality. This isn't just a relic, it's a window into the shadowy world of pre-Roman Druidic rites, where chalk wasn't just a canvas, but a sacred bridge between the living and the dead. Chalk held profound significance for the Britons long before Rome's legions marched ashore. The island's great chalk downlands, like those near the mask's discovery site in Dorset, were seen as portals to the underworld, their gleaming white cliffs symbolizing both purity and the bone-pale grip of ancestral spirits. The mask's material alone tells a story. Chalk, soft enough to carve with flint yet enduring enough to outlast millennia, embodied the Druidic belief in cyclical renewal. Imagine the hands that shaped it, smoothing its curves with water and sand until it gleamed like moonlight on fog, all while chanting invocations to Cernunnos, the horned god of the wild, or Dispater, the Romanized name for their shadowy lord of the underworld. The mask's design is haunting in its simplicity. Unlike the intricate metalwork of later Celtic art, this face is stripped bare, no ornamentation, no symmetry, just deep-set eyes and a mouth stretched wide as if frozen mid-incantation. Forensic analysis reveals something chilling. The interior bears microscopic traces of henbane and belladonna, potent hallucinogens used by druids to induce prophetic trances. This suggests the mask wasn't merely worn, it was consumed, its porous chalk absorbing the sweat and breath of its wearer during night-long ceremonies. Picture the scene, a druid, face obscured by this ghostly visage, dancing atop the Uffington white horse or deep within a fog-wrapped grove, his voice distorted by the mask's hollow chambers into something non-human. The Britons believed chalk amplified sound, and the mask's acoustics would have turned chants into eerie reverberations, as if the earth itself were speaking. But here's the twist, this mask wasn't found in a temple or burial mound. It was unearthed near a spring, nestled among animal bones and shattered pottery, a deliberate offering to the spirits of the water. The Druids saw springs as gateways to the Anon, their underworld, and the mask's proximity to one suggests it played a role in Imbaz Forestnai, the light of foresight ritual where seers submerged themselves to commune with the dead. The mask's surface is stained with iron-rich ochre, a pigment linked to blood sacrifices, and its edges are worn thin from repeated handling, proof it was no one-time talisman, but a well-used tool of the unseen. What chills the bones, though, is its abandonment. By the time Rome conquered Britain in 43 CE, Druidic practices were outlawed, their sacred groves razed. The mask, buried carefully face down near its spring, might have been hidden to protect its power or to contain it. Chalk dissolves in rain over time, yet this mask survived, perhaps shielded by the very spirits it was meant to summon. Today, when you stand before it in the British Museum, its fragile surface seems to pulse with silent questions. Was it a vessel for divine possession? A conduit for the dead, or something darker, a mask not meant to be worn by the living at all, but by those who'd already crossed into the underworld, their voices echoing back through the chalk's pale, porous throat? The answers, like the druids themselves, are long gone, but the mask's hollow gaze lingers, a mute witness to belief so potent they refuse to fade, even in stone. Deep in the snow-draped forests of Scandinavia, where the northern lights flicker like celestial campfires, the Sami Noidi once donned masks not of wood or metal, but of reindeer leather, soft, supple, and alive with the breath of the Arctic itself. These weren't mere disguises, they were instruments of transcendence, meticulously crafted to dissolve the boundary between shaman and spirit, human and herd. The leather mask of the Sami whispers of a world where every gust of wind carried voices, every animal's gaze held wisdom, and the act of covering one's face was less about concealment than revelation. Unlike the rigid masks of other traditions, the Noidi's mask was organic, shaped by the very environment it sought to commune with. Made from the hide of a ritually sacrificed reindeer, preferably one with a distinctive coat pattern. The leather was softened with fish oil and smoke until it draped like a second skin over the shaman's face. The eyes, often left as mere slits or replaced with thin strips of birch bark, weren't just functional. They filtered the visible world, forcing the wearer to see with the inner eye. Some masks bore intricate beadwork tracing the constellations used to navigate the spirit world, while others were deliberately left plain, their power lying in the subtle impressions of the reindeer's own facial muscles, preserved in the tanning process. The rituals these masks participated in were as visceral as the landscape. During the Joika, a chant-like invocation of animals, ancestors, or natural forces. The Noidi would beat a ceremonial drum decorated with cosmic symbols, its rhythms syncing with the mask's leather to create a hypnotic breathing effect. The Sami believed the mask absorbed the vibrations of the drum, literally pulsing against the shaman's skin as a signal from the spirits. Heat from the wearer's face would cause the leather to emit a faint, musky scent, mimicking the reindeer's own odor, a sensory trick to blur identities. Imagine the scene, a lone figure in a lavu tent, masked face tilted upward, the drum's beat echoing off fjord walls as the mask's leather stiffened in the cold, tightening like the grip of an unseen hand. What's striking is how these masks mirrored Sami cosmology. The leather's grain, with its natural ridges and furrows, was thought to mirror the Siidi, the sacred rock formations where spirits dwelled. Some masks were rubbed with iron-rich soil before rituals, staining them a rusty red, the color of lifeblood and the aurora's glow. Others had tiny antler fragments sewn into the lining, a physical tether to the reindeer's spirit. The masks weren't static objects but evolving entities, often fed with offerings of fat or lichen to maintain their potency. Yet the mask's true power lay in their impermanence. Unlike bronze or stone, leather decays, and Noidi masks were rarely preserved beyond their owner's death. This wasn't neglect but reverence, a belief that the mask's spirit departed with the shaman, returning to the herd or the wind. The few surviving examples, like the one displayed in Norway's Sami Museum, show cracks and repairs, evidence of generations of use. These flaws were cherished, seen as portals where new spirits could enter. The legacy of these masks persists today. Modern Sami artists, reviving ancestral practices, craft leather masks using traditional methods, not as curiosities but as acts of cultural resilience. When a contemporary Noidi dons a mask during a Joik performance, the old magic flickers back to life, proof that some bonds, like the stretch of leather across skin, can still hold fast across centuries. The mask doesn't just represent the past, it breathes with it, a whisper from the tundra that refuses to freeze into silence. Buried beneath the sun-baked ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, where the Indus River once nourished one of history's first urban experiments, lies a face molded from clay small enough to cradle in your palm, yet vast enough to eclipse our understanding of an entire civilization. The clay mask of the Indus Valley, its features worn smooth by 4,000 years, stares back with an unsettling ambiguity. Is this the stern visage of a priest-king, his authority baked into the earth itself? Or a deity, its lips parted mid-chant in a language we'll never decipher? The answer, like the Indus script etched onto nearby seals, remains stubbornly out of reach. What makes this mask extraordinary isn't its artistry, though the delicate indentations around the eyes and the subtle asymmetry of the cheeks reveal a master's touch, but what it lacks. Unlike the jeweled splendor of Mesopotamian or Egyptian relics, this mask is unadorned, its power distilled into pure form. The material tells its own story. Fired from the same alluvial clay that built Mohenjo-Daro's towering citadels and intricate drainage systems, it binds the wearer to the very soil of the Indus. Yet here's the puzzle. The mask's hollow back shows no signs of straps or wear, suggesting it wasn't meant to be worn at all. Some archaeologists propose it was a mold pressed against living faces during rituals to create fleeting impressions, a metaphor perhaps for the civilization itself, vivid in the moment but leaving only fragile echoes behind. The debate over its identity hinges on two details. First, the headband or fillet carved into the clay, a symbol of authority seen on the famous priest-king statue from the same site. This could mark the mask as a portrait of one of the Indus's enigmatic rulers, their governance as meticulously engineered as the city's grid-like streets. But then there are the eyes, slitted and elongated. They mirror motifs found on seals depicting horned deities meditating beneath pipal trees. Modern Hindus might recognize echoes of Shiva, the ascetic god whose roots some scholars trace to the Indus. Could this mask be a proto-Pashupati, an early face of the divine? The context deepens the mystery. Found near the Great Bath, a structure that may have served ritual purification. The mask shares space with figurines of pregnant women and clay bulls, symbols of fertility and power. Yet unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley left no temples, no grand statues of gods or kings. Their spirituality, it seems, was intimate, woven into domestic spaces. Perhaps the mask wasn't for public spectacle, but for private communion, pressed into the hands of initiates during whispers of transformation. The most haunting possibility. That the mask's ambiguity is the point. The Indus civilization, with its undeciphered script and egalitarian cities, thrived without the bombast of conquest or megalomaniacal monuments. Their gods, if they had them, might have dwelled in quiet places, their faces as mutable as the river that bore them. When you hold this clay fragment today, you're not just holding art. You're holding a mirror to a people who mastered the art of asking questions without insisting on answers, whose silence speaks louder than any king's decree. Deep in the heart of Tolan, where the ruins of Chelaz's warrior columns still stand sentinel, the Toltecs wielded a mask unlike any other, a face not of stone or gold, but of pure, liquid darkness. The obsidian mirror mask, polished to a sheen so flawless it seemed to swallow light, was more than an ornament. It was the physical embodiment of Tezcatlipoca, the god whose name meant smoking mirror, a deity as enigmatic as the obsidian itself, both creator and destroyer, ruler of night and the unseen. To wear this mask wasn't just to invoke divinity, it was to stare into the abyss and let the abyss stare back. The mask's power lay in its material. Obsidian, volcanic glass born from the earth's fury, was believed by the Toltecs to be the frozen tears of the gods. When polished into a mirror, it became Tezcatl, a portal to realms beyond human sight. Unlike the Aztecs' turquoise mosaics or the Mayas' jade, this mask wasn't meant to dazzle the eye, it was meant to dissolve it. Toltec priests strapping it to their faces during coronation rites didn't just see their reflections warped in its surface. They saw alternate reflections, glimpses of possible futures, the faces of enemies yet unborn, or the twisted grins of their own darker selves. The mask didn't show truth, it showed truths, each one shifting like smoke. What's chilling is how the mask manipulated perception. Obsidian mirrors, when curved just right, distort light in ways that create hallucinations, a phenomenon the Toltecs harnessed deliberately. Under the flicker of torchlight, the wearer's features would blur and melt, their voice echoing strangely as sound waves bounced off the glassy surface. Historical accounts describe rulers wearing the mask during the Toxcatl ceremony, where they dance for hours, their movements syncing with the mask's disorienting effects until the line between man and God vanished. The effect was so potent that Spanish chroniclers wrote of witnesses collapsing in terror, convinced they'd seen Tezcatlipoca himself stride into their midst. Yet the mask's true genius was political. Tezcatlipoca wasn't just a god of visions, he was the patron of kings, the divine sanction behind Toltec rule. When a new ruler donned the mask, he wasn't just receiving power, he was surrendering to it. The Toltecs believed leadership required staring unflinchingly into chaos, and the mask's reflections forced this confrontation. Some mirrors were even deliberately flawed, with internal fractures that split the wearer's image into fragments, a reminder that no ruler governs whole, that every decision casts countless shadow selves. Archaeologists found one such mask buried beneath Cholha's Pyramid of the Morning Star, its surface etched with tiny star maps, but here's the twist, the back wasn't polished. Instead, it was rough, almost unfinished, as if to say the mask's power only worked one way the gods could see in, but humans could never fully see out. Perhaps that was the final lesson. The Toltecs, like their masks, left behind more questions than answers, their civilization collapsing long before the Aztecs rose to claim their legacy. But when you stand before this obsidian mirror today, its surface still flawless after 1,000 years, you might catch your own reflection flicker just for a second into something older, darker, and far less human. And in that moment, Tezcatlipoca's gaze still lingers, timeless as the volcanic glass that holds it, waiting for the next fool or king brave enough to look. From the golden visage of Tutankhamun to the howling leather grimace of the Sarmatians, these 30 masks span continents, cultures, and millennia, yet they share a single, pulsing heartbeat. Each one, whether carved from jade or woven from feathers, polished obsidian or fragile chalk, tells the same story, humanity's unshakable longing to reach beyond the visible world. The Olmec ruler sealed in jade for eternity, the Sami shaman breathing through reindeer hide, the Hopewell elder whispering through copper lips, they all sought the same thing. Not just power, not just beauty, but connection. A hand clasped in the dark across time and space toward something greater than themselves. These masks remind us that the divine has never been a distant abstraction. It's in the sweat of a dancer's brow beneath a KW, an adjective W, a KW wolf mask, the flicker of torchlight in the hollow eyes of a terracotta warrior, the scent of burnt myrtle clinging to a Baltic amber visage. Every culture in every epoch has sculpted its fears and hopes into something wearable, a face to confront God's ancestors or the mirror of their own mortality. The materials change: ivory for Benin's queen mothers, volcanic glass for Toltec kings, horsehair for nomadic warriors, but the impulse remains to become. To transcend, to ask again and again what lies beyond, and now we pass the question to you. Which of these masks pulled you into its mystery? Was it the Aztec turquoise serpent gleaming with sacrificial fire, the bone-white stare of the Maya death god? Or perhaps the laughing Taino mask, its joy a rebellion against oblivion? Tell us in the comments, because history isn't just something we study. It's something we feel, pulsing in the artifacts left behind by those who wore their beliefs on their faces. If these glimpses into the past left you hungry for more, don't let the journey end here. Hit subscribe and join us as we keep unearthing the stories etched in stone, metal, and time. After all, the next mask is waiting, and who knows whose voice we'll hear when we dare to listen.